Hello. If you're new to my content, my name is Lucia, and this is in fact a new channel. For those who don't know me, either you've never watched me before or I really don't know you in real life. I'm 25, I live in New York City, I work in public health / research, and I'm a Virgo, and I read a lot of books. So I kind of decided, it was time for me to talk about them, and I love making videos. Have been doing it since I was probably 14 or 15 years old. Thought what better than to make a whole account dedicated to that. So a little bit about my history on YouTube. Like I said, I've been making videos for a long time. I have privated a lot of them, but one of the first videos that I made was literally like a lip syncing video of me dancing, and I did edit that in Windows Movie Maker. Okay, I took the audio out, but it quite literally is actually a cover of me singing Riptide. So, on my main channel, I also have videos from high school, vlogs that I made in college, as well as some that I did last year because I was trying to challenge myself creatively and just see like if I could think of video ideas, and I kind of could, but it didn't work out as well as I thought. So I feel like I have more to talk about when it comes to books, and I've been watching a lot of book content in the past few years. This felt like a good step. I've never really had a overarching theme going on my main channel, which is why I wanted to make this one separate. I did make one book video on there like last year in probably July or August, and it was kind of fun, but I was like, this is like really random. I had this one edit. You've probably seen it if you came from there. It's a Hunger Games edit, a Taylor Swift song, and I made that over the winter break of my first year in grad school, 2023 December, just out of pure boredom, and I wanted the creative juices to flow, and then it blew up on YouTube. It kind of was astounding to me. Like, I was amazed that I was able to reach that many people. It also was very unexpected. Like, I never made videos for the purpose of blowing up, but I just made them because I wanted to. That edit especially, like, I had literally a dream and my Adobe Premiere subscription from college. Why did I decide to start this channel? I want to challenge myself to think about books more critically, because I'll read a lot, but then I'll be like, oh, I actually don't remember what I read. Or like, oh, like I actually don't think I can explain the plot to you. It'll take me a second to be able to articulate what I enjoyed about it or things like that. So hopefully this can be a good way for me to practice that. I think it is a skill, especially, reading comprehension, literacy is going down, and I think this is a good way to try and boost that, or at least like support my own literacy / comprehension in a sense. Overall, my goals for this channel: share the books that I'm reading or want to read. I might make some video essays about book-ish content / media / things that I have been dying to talk about and don't have like a proper outlet for. Maybe if I'm inspired, I'll put an edit on this channel. I don't know. That might be reserved for my main channel. I'm not really sure. Kind of just going with the flow here. And lastly, I think this channel is just for fun. If it ever starts to feel more like a chore, I'll just stop making videos, because this is not my job. Like, I have a full-time job, so. So what's the plot of today's video? Well, the first half you just saw was an intro to me and my history on YouTube. And now I'm gonna talk about my reading journey a little bit, like how I got here. Maybe I'll go over my favorite books of 2025, and then like things I want to make in this channel. Let's just get started. I kind of started reading again in March 2020 when the pandemic / quarantine hit. I was living in North Carolina with my family at the time and working 2 jobs and also a college student. I was a sophomore. I mean, I was pretty busy with school and my jobs, but outside of that, I was pretty bored because, we were just home all the time and I had really nothing to do. One night, I opened up the Libby app, which I actually knew about because before March 2020, I was still occasionally reading maybe like one book every 3 months. So I had the Libby app downloaded. I had my local library card already inputted in it, but I wasn't very consistently reading. I would only pick up a book like on a school break, like summer break or winter break, anything like that. When I had only free time, I didn't have anything else to think about, and I was just bored out of my mind. Of course, a little bit of this had to do with the fact that I had become almost jaded by reading because of school. I actually liked all my English classes when I was in school, but I think it did take the joy out of reading for leisure away from me because I would want to approach a book like I would for class. Honestly, sometimes I do that with like specific books where I want to learn more, or like I want to annotate or think critically and more deeply about it. But sometimes like a book, you just have to like sit down and like read it for fun, you know what I mean? So it was very hard for me to get through something, and I think a lot of people have the same experience because you're not really taught like how to enjoy a book for the sake of enjoying it. That one night when I picked up the Libby app, I think I went to the library, the catalog, and one of the books that was available now was The Martian by Andy Weir. I've actually read The Martian before, like I had at that point, because I had seen the movie with my family. I had a copy of the book, but for some reason I downloaded it onto Libby. I opened it up, and after the first chapter I was like, oh wow, like I don't remember any of this, but I love it. And that's kind of how it started. Like I literally just couldn't stop reading that book on my phone. I was like this, the same phone that I'm filming with right now. And so I think I finished that book probably in like 3 hours that same night. I felt like ecstatic, like almost euphoric, the kind of euphoria you feel like experiencing something new for the first time. That's so redundant. You know what I mean? It was like I had never read a book before. After that day, I just kind of like went through the available books on Libby. I asked my friends for recommendations, and I started reading like the most random books, like The Magic of Tidying Up, Marie Kondo, Michelle Obama's first memoir, Becoming, I think that was what it's called, Educated, by Tara Westover. I read all the Percy Jackson books because I had those, and like a bunch of other books that had been on my childhood shelf untouched for like 10 years, maybe like 5 to 10 years. But yeah, that was just crazy. Like I felt so mentally stimulated for the first time in ages, and it was spurred because I was sitting at home unable to go out and like participate in society basically. So at the end of that year, I think I counted up, and I had read about 20 new books, which was a high number for me at the time because I probably read 20 books in total between 2016 and 2020. And I decided I was going to make a Storygraph account, which I still use today. You can follow me. And I set my goal very ambitiously for 50 books for 2021. And it worked. I mean, I was just like speeding through these books. A lot of them were, you know, maybe more juvenile. Like I was reading the Lunar Chronicles for a good week, but that was still so amusing and like entertaining, and I just felt joyful. You're gonna tell me not to read a book? Like, okay. And then I did again in 2022, 2023, 2024. Every year I've had a goal of at least 50 books, and I've always reached it. I actually find that I reach it pretty easily. I don't try to limit myself to certain types of genres, though there are definitely some that I prefer. And that brings us to today. So today on my Storygraph, I think I have around 365 books logged since January of 2021. So over the 5 years I've had it, 365 divided by 5, it's like 70-ish per year on average. I know I said I had a goal of 50, but in 2022 I did read 100 books. I'll explain more about that later. And I have the same goal for this year, of course. The number is not really like mandatory in my head. It's more of like a way to pace myself, but I end up always passing the number anyways, just because like I read so fast. Moving on to some of my favorite genres / what I like to read. Based on my Storygraph, I mostly read sci-fi, fantasy, literary / contemporary, and young adult / middle grade. However, I will say that this is a little bit skewed because again, in 2022 I read 100 books and 60 of them were from a children's fantasy series. If you know which one I'm talking about, you're a real one. I'll definitely make a video on this one day. You can find it on my story graph if you don't know what series it is, but I think I need to like sit down and explain the lore behind that, so that will be in a separate video. I do like find myself reaching for YA when I need something easy to read though, so like that's actually not untrue. Like it is somewhat in my storygraph account. However, I think I find myself drawn to sci-fi the most. Like that's the genre that I want to read when I am not reading a book currently, but I'm like, oh, I wish I had something right now that I could just dive into. Besides sci-fi, probably literary fiction. I just love books about characters that have like no plot except the plot is like about their life. I think it helps me reflect on myself, but also like you get to empathize with these characters and everyone's like a little bit bad or a little bit good, but it's like, oh, people are gonna make mistakes and do stupid shit, but that's just what it's like to be a human. I love those kinds of books. Also was on a classics kick for a while, and this was partly because I read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and then I was like, OMG, I need to read David Copperfield, which took me over a year to read, but I did read that. But in the meantime, I was reading like a bunch of books that I hadn't read in school, like The Outsiders. Also did see the musical, very good. Animal Farm, Fahrenheit 451. All those like books that like I never actually read in school because we had different assignments, but I wanted to read them as an adult to see like what were the themes, like what were we talking about, why was this being taught. So I actually really liked those. I also have this thing with Pride and Prejudice. Like it's one of my favorite books, and I've read probably 20 something different adaptations of it, like modern adaptations, and it's like my personal quest to find every single modern adaptation that I can and read it and judge for myself if I think it's a good retelling of that story. I'll probably make a video on that one day as well. There's a lot of reasons why I love that book, but it's also such a famous classic that I don't think I need to describe why I love that book. It's just really good, and I reread it at least once a year, probably, at minimum. I don't find myself very drawn to romance outside of Pride and Prejudice and the adaptations, but I'll occasionally read one if I need something light or like funny, something like that. I'm not really into mystery / thriller or like horror. I mean, I don't really watch horror movies either. It's just like I get freaked out, so I'd rather not have a nightmare after I've been reading my books at night. Besides that, like I'm pretty open to most types of genres. I've been trying to get into poetry, but I don't really know where to start. And for a long time I didn't really get it. Like I didn't really understand what poetry was, but it's basically like anything that isn't prose. I kind of had to reevaluate how I thought about poetry and consider it more of something where you can think about how the writing makes you feel versus like how it's structured. And of course the structure can be part of it, especially if, you know, the author plays with it a little bit, but there's really no rules. You kind of just do what you feel. It's hard for me to like move away from reading prose all the time to like poetry that is literally uninhibited. But if you have any recommendations for that, I'd be glad to take them. I will say I have been influenced by book content. I was never really on Book Talk, but I sort of found a few book talk creators who have YouTube channels, and I will watch those when I need a background video or like when I'm taking a walk. I'll usually put that on instead of like a podcast or anything. Speaking of, I don't really like audiobooks. They're just not for me, but instead of audiobooks, I watch YouTube videos of people talking about books. The last thing I like to do is sometimes just go to the library and pick something off the shelf instead of, you know, like being recommended to me. I just literally read it off of a whim, like, oh, this sounds interesting, I'll pull it. And it's actually done me a lot of wonders before, so I would highly recommend that. It's like the old-fashioned way of how we got books recommended to us. So now a slight Q&A that my sister prepared. She just gave me some questions basically to answer. So hey, thanks for giving me these questions. I'm going to answer some of them now. Books that got me into reading. I was a big reader as a kid. I feel like that's probably obvious. But the biggest one was probably Percy Jackson. But I also remember very avidly reading A to Z mysteries in school. Magic Tree House was a big one. I read that like historical fiction series of all those like young girls that were in different time periods, and they all had like a different situation that they had to deal with. I don't remember what they're called, but I really like those. I have a lot of memories from being in the school library is what I'm trying to say. And I've had my library card from my local library from home probably like at least 16 years by now. That was never something I had to learn how to love per se. I feel like I've just always been reading, and I always had like a big vocabulary. A little bit later in middle school, I think I was on the dystopian grind for a while, so Hunger Games, Harry Potter was big. I also read a lot of Louis Satcher as a kid. He wrote Holes. He wrote Wayside School Stories. I also met him last year when he released a new novel for the first time in like 10 years. It was fine. It was a little juvenile, but I feel like because he was a children's author for his whole career, it made sense. As an adult, as I mentioned, the books that got me back were The Martian, Lunar Chronicles. Oh, I actually really liked Station 11. That got me back into reading in 2021. And I also read the Poppy War series, or at least the first book, like in 2021, around the time when I was really digging my heels back in. Some books that almost made me quit reading. You know, every reading journey has its ups and downs. I tried several times to read ACOTAR, just the first book. I do have friends who like the series. However, it was not for me. I tried to get through the first book, and I probably got to chapter 11, and I couldn't take it anymore. Like, this was 3 separate tries. So I'm sorry to those of you out there. I don't think that one's happening. I did read half of the Throne of Glass books as well, also by Sarah J Maas, and I may get back to those. I wouldn't say they're my favorite books, probably, you know, actually near the bottom, but like they're entertaining, and I actually was able to follow the plot and find something that I liked about it. Another one, Red Queen. I actually did read 3 out of the 4 books in this series, but at one point they were like hooking up in the mud, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, this is so stupid. You guys are like in the middle of a war. Like, why are you like sneaking away from the castle to do this? I don't even remember the characters' names. Whatever. If you love Red Queen, I'm so sorry, and that's fine. Like, I wasn't for me. Anyways, my favorite books of all time. So I've already mentioned a lot of them. The Martian, Pride and Prejudice, Percy Jackson, the first series, I think The Last Olympian specifically, and The Titan's Curse. Those were like 2 of my favorite books in middle school. I would check them out every week and just like keep checking them out. Some other honorable mentions: Demon Copperhead was great. I love Kindred by Octavia Butler. Always such a scary book when I read it, but it's amazing. I really loved Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. I bought this off of someone in my neighborhood. I actually need to reread this, so good reminder. And Project Hail Mary, because I have read all of Andy Weir's books. I think The Martian and Project Hail Mary are his best, but I'm excited to see the movie for that this year. And of course, The Hunger Games, though I think the 2 sequels / prequels that she wrote are not as strong. They have their pros and cons, I'll say that. My favorite books of 2025. So last year I read over 50 books. I think the total number was 54, and these are just some of the books that stood out to me. So I have a list over here. Persuasion by Jane Austen. That was the first time I read Persuasion. Commitment by Mona Simpson. This was a contemporary fiction. It is about this mother and her 3 kids, and it kind of just describes their lives after her oldest child goes off to college, and like she gets sent into this like rehabilitation hospital / mental health like center because she has like severely debilitating depression. And it just kind of explains little tidbits from their lives, like as they deal with this mental illness, and then also like what are the kids up to, because they're still living their independent lives. The next one was Self-Portrait with Nothing by Amy Potwatka. This was a book I pulled off the shelf. It was about this woman who's adopted, and she wants to find her birth mother or something, or maybe her birth mother contacted her somehow. I don't really remember how the setup happened, but it ended up with like alternate dimensions and being involved, and like her mother's a painter in this world, and then her paintings are all of herself, but like they're herself in alternate dimensions. And then just like how did that all come together and like affect the current dimension that they're in. It was bizarre, but I loved it. I read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison this year. Very creepy book, like all of her writing, but very good as well. I read East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I've been meaning to read this one for a while. I think just want to get more into Steinbeck. I have The Grapes of Wrath on my TBR. We'll see when I get to that. But East of Eden, if you don't know, it's kind of like a biblical illusion of Cain and Abel. But in this illusion, they are Caleb and Adam, I believe, and they live in Salinas Valley, California. And it kind of like follows those two brothers and then like their families' lives and like what happens. I really loved how like all of the characters' stories kind of interwove into each other's. I need some water. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm back. Hopefully I'm still in frame. Sorry if that was loud. Where was I? James by Percival Everett. I think a lot of people that I watch on YouTube talked about this book as well. It's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of James, who is an enslaved man. And it kind of just like subverts a lot of expectations for what people thought enslaved people talk like or acted like or thought like. And I think it really just gives agency to James and kind of allows him to reclaim that story, which is why it was so like notably honored and everything. It was like one of the most talked about books, I think, in 2024 or 2025. So I also really loved Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. It's the third book in her YA series Legendborn. I can't really talk about Oathbound without spoiling the rest of the books, but I love Legendborn. It's about this young black girl named Brianna Matthews. She goes by Bree. She's from North Carolina. She goes to this early college program at UNC, which is where I went to college, so it's like kind of bizarre to read about. But she ends up involved with this secret society because she witnesses them doing magic, and she believes that magic is connected to her mother's death that occurred like a few months earlier. It has to do a little bit with Welsh mythology, which is really interesting. I've never like really read anything about Welsh mythology except for the Raven Cycle series, if you guys know that one. So that's just beautifully done. It's well crafted. The world is nicely built. The characters are fleshed out. I love Alice, that's Bree's best friend. I love Will, he's one of the kids in the secret society. Nick is awesome. There's a guy named Sal, he's really moody, he's like an angsty teen. It's like great. I really liked Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I think a lot of people have also been talking about this book. It's about this guy who wakes up in this like it's like a never-ending palace / tower / world where he's like in a labyrinth and he has to figure out how to get out. It's like day 1000 something, I don't remember the number, but he needs to figure out this mystery. There's only one other person in there with him, and you know there's like food and clothes and stuff, but like he doesn't know why he's there. And at first he's like, oh, like I love it here, like my job is just to map out all of the halls and towers and stuff, but like there's something deeper, more sinister going on. Another book I picked up off the shelf was called Circular Motion by Alex Foster. This was a sci-fi book where in this world the earth is spinning a little bit faster, like increasing in rate, so the days are getting shorter and shorter. And so to combat this, like there's this one company who is actually they didn't combat it, they caused it, allegedly. So in this world there was this company that built like a teleportation machine, but not really. It's like an elevator that would take you to orbit, and then it circles you around the globe to a place where you need to go, and this can happen really quick. So like they're saying that this company has caused the earth to accelerate faster because it's interfering with like orbit of the earth. I don't know, the science wasn't really explained. It's just kind of like you just believe it, it's fine. But I really liked how the characters that are involved in the company versus like regular people in the world that are being affected by the earth spinning faster, how they're connected, and then like what are repercussions of like, oh, like selling out to a big corporation like this, or like what does it mean to like live with people that you don't really consider your family but like they're your only legal guardians and things like that. So a lot of like random deep themes and topics that were talked about. I also loved Cold Wire by Chloe Gong. I've read probably all of her books at this point, just like by mistake. I think her writing style is very easy to get through, and she loves a third act plot twist. But this book specifically was about, it's like a futuristic world where people either live in the real world downstream, or they can plug into VR and live in their avatar mode online upstream. And so you follow these two characters, one's upstream, one is downstream, and they are both dealing with different problems in their lives, and you kind of just see like what's going on in this world, how are their problems connected. There's like issues with surveillance, like government takeover, all these kind of questions, and like AI almost. It's really hard to explain. I think you should just read it. The last one I have on here is Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I did think it sounded a little bit like YA when I was reading it, but I enjoyed the story overall. I thought it was cute. I know it's mostly about like hell and death, but I found the book very easy to read, and I think that's difficult for me to say of her books. My favorite author, honestly, I would say Andy Weir. Even though I don't really actually think he's the best author, like best writer, I think some of his books could do well with a sensitivity reader. However, I love the amount of heart he puts into them, and I always know when I read his book that like I'm gonna end up feeling touched and like I'll probably cry. So what's a fun reading quirk? I'll use anything as a bookmark when I'm reading a physical copy. One time I used a book as a bookmark for another book. Another time I think I used my hairbrush. Right now though, I've just been using receipts recently, so that one's not super crazy. The weirdest book I've ever read was called Glyph by Ali Smith, I believe. I read it last year. I don't even know how to explain it. It was just a little bit scary, like Toni Morrison writing style, but then also Brave New World plot, even though I haven't read Brave New World, but I know like what it's about, like utopia, whatever. But there was this one part in Glyph where the author kept changing the phrase a brave new world and like deleting certain letters to make it say different words, and that was really freaky to me, but I liked it, so I would recommend. 2026 reading goals. So I wrote a few down. I think a big one for me is reading more nonfiction. I have Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake on my shelf, and I've started that last year. I just haven't really picked it up since, but I think it's really interesting. It's just a book about fungi, so I want to get more into that. I also was reading The Question of Palestine by Edward Said last year. I think I just need a physical copy. It was getting really hard to read on my phone and on my iPad. I want to finish some more classic novels this year. On my Storygraph account, I have a classics challenge. It's mostly for me, but I mean, I made it public so people can join. And I just want to read at least one classic novel a month. I tried to do this last year, and I got through 4 months. Right now, I'm on James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room, so that will count for me as January's book. But I also want to get to The Grapes of Wrath, like I said, and then maybe some others. I do want to try and revisit some of the books I started last year but didn't finish, and I wouldn't consider these DNF. Sometimes I just pause a book because it's not the time or my hold at the library runs out. But I have a few. So I have Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston. I did read this in high school, probably in 12th grade, but I don't really recall what happened. I know like there's a character named Janie and it's like about her love life, but I don't really remember. I also have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf and also The Waves, both of which are very hard to read, so I haven't really gotten super far. Next, I want to knock some books off of my physical TBR because I do have a very small New York apartment and I have a lot of books on my shelf. Like this is the living room shelf. My roommate's books are here too, but in my room I have more books. One specifically, The Priory of the Orange Tree. It's like this thick. Maybe I should start it. So I think that's like my big goal, like to finish that book or at least start it. I also want to read Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I won this book on a Storygraph giveaway actually, so I've had a copy of it. I've just never read it. I think I read his other book. I don't remember actually. we'll see if I remember later. And finally, I want to reread a few books that I think it's time to reread and revisit. So probably this one first, Cloud Cuckoo Land. I just remember loving it so much the first time I read it. I want to reread Wuthering Heights because the movie is coming out in February, and I feel like it's going to be a mess, but I also need to remember what happened in that book. And I want to reread A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I'm trying to see if I have it. This is actually my roommate's copy, but also a great book. My sister actually introduced me to this back in 2021. It's just a little coming of age story that takes place in Williamsburg, which a lot of my friends live in right now. So I think it'll be fun to dive back into this and just like know what they're talking about. And that is my video. Thank you for watching. If you did get all the way through, I appreciate it. You probably heard my voice go from like super energized to like dry and like dead. But yeah, again, you can follow me on Storygraph. I update it pretty frequently. I'm doing the January challenge right now, so it's been updated. And I don't have any other social medias right now that are for this booktube channel specifically, but you can follow my other channel if that's something you are interested in, or find me on my other accounts. You can find them all on that main channel. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment or like or subscribe if you want to see more. I don't know when, but my goal is maybe post 1 or 2 videos a month for now. Yeah, thanks for watching. I feel like I need to sign off. Thanks for coming to La La Land. See you next time in La La Land.